We are the 29th of September. Here where I find myself empirically, it's 7:34 p.m. and I intend to make a lecture on the logic of quantity, which is one of the aspects of the metaphysical definition of God. But first, I will be true to one of my ethical standards, namely I will begin the video by promoting a few books that I haven't even read, but I said to myself I will promote these books. Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto, some sort of a left-wing critique of the educational system. The School Revolution by Ron Paul. A New Answer for Our Broken Education System. Real Education by Charles Murray. 4 Simple Truths for Bringing America's Schools Back to Reality. So that's just these are books which illustrate the current state of the American educational system, but it's valid for the Western world at large. Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber, some sort of a communist, leftist, anarchist. The Utopia of Rules, about the nonsense of bureaucracy, mostly. Bureaucracy by Ludwig von Mises, a right-wing libertarian economist. In Our Hands, a plan to replace the welfare state. Because there are many problems with the welfare state. I will not talk about this in this video, but I just share my books. A book by Daisy Luther. This is American Feminine Common Sense, and and again another book by Charles Murray, Rebuilding Liberty Without Permission, by the people. There's a problem with the current people of the United States. They are not as smart as they used to be, or as I thought they were. But I will try to make, as at first, the English-speaking audience, to try to make them smart again. So yeah, I have just shared my books. That's part of the contract, I guess. I shouldn't have signed that contract, but whatever. So now we'll talk about what is really interesting in life, namely logic. So hopefully we see. Wait, I have to. What is logic? This is the mind of God, and I will just illustrate. So I will talk about the logic of quantity. First I will just briefly talk. Just an idea that I would like to share. I've already shared this. First, I will put the link to my latest video about the process of God and the totality of being, which is a very long video, but I've spent a lot of time making this video, but also it's the result of many years of thinking, reflection, and work, partly. There's just an idea that, as of now, I'm the only person in the world who has grasped this idea, namely that when people talk on the internet, they think that they talk to their audience or their followers or their subscribers or to a person that they want to reach, but they do not understand that language and expression and thoughts are universal. Namely, anyone with an internet connection can access potentially any content on the internet and become aware of the current state of the world and the state of consciousness, namely how the world is and how people think about the world, how they relate to their relationship to the world in terms of consciousness. That's a very complex process, but I just would like to say this. So as of now, my channel has I think 23 subscribers, but my purpose, which is logically determined, is to talk to everyone, because every human is a thinking agent. I mean, every thinking human can think and therefore can understand thoughts and thought determinations. But I'm well aware that I first have to reach a particular audience, namely an English-speaking audience. At first, that's why I make video in English. Yeah, that was the introduction. Now I will talk about logic. Yeah, so what is logic? This is the mind of God. Not these categories, but logic is the mind of God, because God is very smart. It's a thinking entity, and here are the categories circled in red. The categories of the logic of quantity, and I will put the link in the description below. I made a video about speculative logic, which talked about the logic of quality, and what follows is the logic of quantity. And here I will try to introduce very simply the categories. There are some sort of the mental boxes, the building blocks of the mind, which are also the building blocks of reality, namely the thoughts that everyone uses, consciously or unconsciously. They do not use the words, but they use the thought, which are enveloped, hidden, contained within the words, in order to think their relationship to reality. One and many, namely, and then Zahl means number, the concept of number. Every person with a sane mind uses the category of number in everyday life to talk. The price of objects, the distances, the time, it's all is quantified. So yeah, here are the categories of quantity. So I'll just mention them briefly, and then I will discuss each one of them and explain how they arise within the mind of God, and eventually within the mind of all humans, which are made in the image of God. So the categories of quantity, we have one and many. If you want to understand or watch the video about the logic of quality, I do not have the time, or it would be too long, so I go to the point. I talk about the logic of quantity. One and many, attraction and repulsion. Here it's the transition between the logic of quality and the logic of quantity. And all these determinations, these categories, are metaphysical definitions of God. So what is God? God is the one. God is quantity. God is a number, etc., etc. It's not just that, but it's a moment in the process of the development of the entity that people call God. So there's a misunderstanding about what God is. But I will talk about this later. So here are the categories. One and many, attraction and repulsion. Quantity, it's written in German, but it's quantity. Größe means in English magnitude. Continuity and discretion. I will illustrate later. I just show the broad category. Quantum, which in ordinary language we call either number or quantity, but the technical terminology is quantum. Then we have number, Zahl in German, unity, and what could be called unit or units. So Einheit is unity, and Anzahl is kind of difficult to translate for a non-native German-speaking person, but that would be unit. So the units within the unity. Then we have arithmetic. I will show how arithmetic emerges out of the mind of God. Sometimes it is said by some philosophers that God is a mathematician. Where do mathematics come from? Well, from the mind of God. And then we have rechnen, zählen, und nummerieren, which in English means to calculate, to count, and to number. That's the first. These are categories, so the categories of quantity. So when we talk about quantity, what is quantity? Here we have already a few categories, but it's not. There are more. More is a quantitative determination. So now I will show other categories of quantity. I kind of improvise because I've understood, I thought to myself that I have to try to mix some sort of a minimum of rigor that I will not give up on whenever I talk publicly, but I have to improvise to accept the failure, which is kind of frustrating because I experience myself as failing in most of what I do. But anyway, here in the continuity is a category of quantity. If you have followed the video up until there. Okay, so now we continue. We have so we had arithmetic. Now we have the modes of calculus or calculation. Addieren means to add or addition. Addition is the operation, and to add is the process of adding numbers. Then we have subtraction. Multiplizieren means to multiply. That's multiplication. We have division. I will explain the drawing, and I will explain. These are just how the basic arithmetic operations emerge within the logical process, namely within the mind of God. Actually, it's a little bit more complicated, but here it's just to simplify, to show how come that humans can add, multiply, divide, subtract, etc., etc. I will comment also the drawings. It took me a couple of hours, I guess, but it can be useful because it enables to explain universal thought determination. So here we have erheben in the potence, which means to elevate in power. These are a number multiplied by itself. 2 multiplied by 2, etc. It's here my limitation is that I am not a native English speaking person empirically, so yeah, but I will illustrate. So here it's just how arithmetic emerges out of the mind of God. And here, later categories, we have intensity and extension. I will illustrate with example. I'm just introducing what I'm going to talk about. So we have intensity and extension. Grad is a German word, which is a degree or grade in English. We have unendliche quantitative Progress, which means infinite quantitative progress. And finally, quantitative Verhältnis, which means quantitative relationship. So these are, and then we have measure, which is a transition into a third moment. But these are the broadest categories of quantity. And now I will, it's been 12 minutes, now I will comment systematically these categories and explain what they mean and what they are, where they come from, how they emerge, how humans use them, the misunderstanding that they cause sometimes. My conscious plan is to bring about order, and order begins by ordering one's mind. So, do we see clearly? I've taken a few notes. Yeah, so these are, I will just comment. We don't need to see the full, just need the. Okay. I will comment briefly. So, one is completed quality. What is being? Being is quality. What is quality? I made a video about this. Hopefully a good quality video. And it is, the one is a being which completes itself qualitatively. And how does multiplicity emerge out of unity? That's a very profound philosophical question, and I will try to give a convincing answer. And here it's my problem is that I fail to communicate the interest or the value of at least some of the videos that I produce. Namely, I talk about God in most of my videos, and very few people watch them. So I've understood that I completely missed the point. Namely, I fail to really to communicate the basic. So how does multiplicity emerge out of unity? Here I will have to use a religious language. It is said that God is one. This is the definition of monotheism, and since these categories are the metaphysical definition of God, they apply to religious views as well. So why do we care talking about the one? Is because the one is that which the religion called God. The Muslims, the Jews, the ancient Egyptians, and the Christians, when they are not, if I wanted to make a joke, I say when they are not very inspired, precisely because there is no spirit in one, or there is no movement, maybe. I don't know, but yeah. Here I will talk about philosophy and religion. The one. Why do we care about the categories of quantity? Because there are lots of people who believe that God is the one, which is partly true, but not completely, because if God is just the one, it's very abstract. It's not empty, but it's kind of very poor. So there are a lot of people on this planet who believe that God is the one principle, the one essence, if they use the word essence, the one transcendent entity who lives God knows where. But actually no, precisely because I will show how multiplicity, that what you call the many, emerge out of the one. How the one makes itself many. Yeah, and now a little bit of philosophy. In the history of philosophy, the one who talks about the one is Plotinus, a Neoplatonic philosopher. So there are people, scholars, who talk about, Neoplatonism, the one. Yeah, but the one is a very poor category, basically. So the distinction, or the passage from unity or oneness to multiplicity, I will explain why. It's because, and here my video about speculative logic. The one is, from a conceptual standpoint, is that which excludes the other from itself. Namely, it is one, it is only in relation to itself, and the German name for the one is für sich sein. It is being in relation to itself through the re-establishment of self-identity after having negated through Bestimmtheit. Here it's a little bit more complex for those who haven't followed the process, but basically the one is divided within itself already, but here I put colors to simplify. There is negation or negativity within the one, which makes the one separate itself from itself, and this is, in logical language, this is a repelling or a repulsion, namely self-negation, negative Beziehung auf sich selbst, as Hegel would say, a negative relation to self. So that's self-negation, and the good aspect about self-negation is that it brings forth multiplicity. The one was so full of himself, probably, that he decided, I will multiply myself. Then he saw the result and he said, probably, maybe that was a mistake. No, that's a joke. Yeah, so the one negates itself, which brings about, here it's not very rigorous, but it brings about an other, but the one produces another self from itself, another one, and now we have one and the other, and when the other is also a one, this is the beginning of multiplicity. In the realm of quality, it's Dasein und Nichtsein, etwas und etwas anders, something and something else. Here it's one and another one, and when there are one and another one, we have a name for this, we call two, and eventually there are many, because this other one is like the one before, so it divides itself also, it negates itself and brings about another one, etc., which brings about many ones, which is how multiplicity emerges. And now we had the one, now we have the many. They bring many problems, these little ones. That's a joke. The secret to happiness in life is to study speculative logic. It doesn't bring happiness precisely because there is negation, and but so through a process of self-negation and repulsion, the one multiplies itself and it produces other selves, which are other ones, and that's how the many, the multiplicity, emerge out of the one. And now we have, and because the ones, they are all one, the one is many and the many are one, the many ones are one, so they are in relation to each other, but actually they are kind of the same, although they are different, so they are attracted by one another because they want to re-establish self-relation. So that's how attraction, here we have repulsion, and here we have kind of an ambiguous relationship. There is kind of a distance, a negative relation, but also an attraction. And they are attracted by one another, although they repel one another, and that's how this is how the categories of attraction and repulsion and unity and multiplicity emerge out of being. Yeah. And now, I know it's way too technical, I have to simplify even more. So, in philosophical language, the one is Plotinus. Also, Proclus, I read a passage. Proclus attempts to demonstrate the many as one and the one as many. All determinations and particularly that of multiplicity, are resolved into themselves and return into unity. Proclus's philosophy displays the self-development of the one. So Plotinus, Proclus, these are Neoplatonic philosophers of the early centuries of the Christian era, officially, who thought and wrote and talked officially about the one and the many and their reciprocal interactions. Yeah. Now, a little bit of physics. Yeah, I have picked up a book. Why do we bother with the categories? Because these are the building blocks of the mind of God. So here it's a metaphor, not a metaphor, an analogy. The categories are to the mind what the atoms are to the physical world. Namely, they are the elements which help build the infinite variety and multiplicity of the world. With a few elements, physical elements, the atoms, one can build maybe can build an infinitely varied world with the infinite diversity. The planets, the galaxies, the stars, the satellites, and then the planet Earth with all the living things and all the objects, all the various state of the material world, etc., etc. So, yeah, and the categories are the building block of the mind, and they are found in the mind of God, in the mind of humans, who are made in the image of God. This is one of the reasons why. And also within reality. Namely, reality is structured by these thought determinations, these categories. And here I will illustrate, in case it's not clear, Mr. Feynman, a book about electromagnetism. And here, another. One of the fundamental determinations of the physical world is precisely attraction and repulsion on a molecular and atomic level. The electrons, which are the negative electric charges circling around atoms, they have a negative electric charge, so they repel one another, they exert repulsion upon one another, and that's the reason why one cannot go through a book, because the electrons on my hand are repelled. There is repulsion between the electrons on the cover of the book and the electrons on my hand. This is why we do not fall through the ground. That's why we hit ourselves when we hit a wall. Yeah, and attraction, these are positive charges in atoms, but also in gravity. So here it's the electromagnetic force, which is one of the four fundamental forces of physics, which pervades the entire physical universe, is made of attraction and repulsion, which is positive and negative electric charges, and the polarity of magnetism as well. The same poles, they repel one another, and the opposed poles, they attract one another, northern and southern poles. Yeah, and the principle of gravity, which is not strictly speaking a force, but a curvature of space-time, whatever. Gravity is the universal attraction. It's precisely that object with a mass, they attract other object with a mass, and they are attracted as well. That's the fundamental law of one of the fundamental laws of physics. So this is how the fundamental determination of the physical world emerged from the mind of God. That's why nature is rational, because it's structured by logical categories. And here I will, I'm in a mood a little bit to trash talk the Anglo-Saxon physicists and then scientists, where they say, oh, we don't need metaphysics, our good old empiricism. Of course, empiricism is useful. That's why I promote American common sense. But they do not ask themselves the question, but where do the fundamental determinations of nature come from? Well, from the mind of God, obviously. Yeah, and then I said that I will make shorter video, no more than 30 minutes, because otherwise it's too long. So I just finish commenting this, and then I will stop the video and I will remake another video with another intro. It will be a little bit boring, but I have to make my video successful eventually. So yeah, I just finished with the categories of attraction and repulsion. In religious language, there is monotheism, because here this is metaphysics, but metaphysics and religion, eventually they coincide. It is just a conceptual way of talking about religious determination. So the one is monotheism and the many is polytheism. The opposition between monotheist religion and polytheist religion. Here is European polytheism, and the monotheist religion are Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and partly Hinduism. But Hinduism is kind of complex because it's they have the two. They have the one God, Brahma, and the many gods or the many aspects, etc., etc. And precisely the opposition between Christianity and what is called paganism, which is actually just a European religion, but there are pagan religions wherever there is a pre-Abrahamic religious tradition. The opposition is simply the opposition between the one and the many. But who is right? Who is correct? To say that God is one is partly true, but it's partly false. And to say that God is many, I mean that there are many gods, it's partly true, partly false as well. The truth is the unity of both, namely a Christianized version of paganism or a paganized version of Christianity. That's how the contradiction can be resolved, namely by showing that one-sidedness is not proper. Precisely, this is speculative logic. And here I will make a brief comment about precisely speculative logic. The ordinary mind, der Verstand, which is the one-sided mind, thinks of these categories in their one-sidedness, in their abstraction from the other, namely for what I call a Verstandish mind, which is mostly prevalent within Anglo-Saxon. The categories, they are just what they are, and they are not the other moment. So in ordinary language, it would mean the one is the one, the many are many. Attraction is attraction, repulsion is repulsion. No, precisely. On a speculative level, the one is many, the many are one. Attraction is, I wouldn't say repulsive, but it's repulsion and attraction are in some sort of a conceptual unity. And here I will talk. I took a few notes to illustrate. No, I've talked about the philosophical, religious aspect. Now I will illustrate with examples. Let us begin with the one and the many. In the realm of politics, the category of one can be used for monarchy, the principle of monarchy, or despotism, but let us take the noble aspect. Monarchy is simply the category of the one applied to the realm of politics. There is one ruler, the king. But then, that's the high version, and then there's the lower version, not in a moral sense, in a sense of prestige. Maybe this is individualism, the Anglo-Saxon tradition, and the Western tradition of individualism. And here I will promote one of my books. I'm a little bit of a schemer because sometimes but I'm scheming against myself. So yeah. Individualism. An individual is the one in the realm of biology, but also in the realm of politics. So here's a book about individualism and the Western tradition by Kevin MacDonald. Individualism is simply the principle, the category of the one applied to politics, but in a sense not of the one against all the others, the principle of oneness for the many. That's respect for individual life, property, right to protection against the abuse of the state, etc. And that's mostly the Anglo-Saxon tradition, but actually it runs throughout the Western political tradition. So, where are my notes? Yeah, I don't need my notes, but it's just to... individualism is simply the category of the one applied to the realm of politics, and this is what brings forth, paradoxically, brings forth democracy. And here, democracy is kind of a speculative... I will pick up another book. Democracy is kind of a speculative regime. That's why it's because it's the principle of the one applied to the many. So in a democracy, many people are granted individual rights, precisely. Sometimes too many individuals. A book by Mr. Hoppe. Democracy, the God that failed. Yeah. So the major political opposition within the Western tradition, but actually in all societies, can be understood through the determinations of these very simple thought determinations, namely democracy is the regime of the many, of the masses, and fascism as well, but fascism is the many without the one. Basically, it's the one without the many would be monarchy or even despotism. The many without the one would be degenerate democracy or fascism, and the proper balance would be some sort of an aristocratic republic, which is partly democratic in a sense, not that everyone has a right to vote, etc., but in a sense that many people are allowed to have power, and an aristocracy, a republican aristocracy, which is kind of the ideal of Sparta, ancient Rome, and partly sometimes the American Republic when it was still vigorous. Yeah. So these are examples. And yeah, let us talk about politics. If too much rights are granted to the individual against the mass, against the rest of the people are oppressed by the freedom granted to the individual for the simple reason that the many are one. They are composed of ones. So if the one is granted too much freedom, it brings about disruption, and this, in ordinary language, moral decay, selfishness, egotism, greed, etc., etc. When the individual is granted too much freedom, it has a negative impact upon the whole society, because the society is made up of ones, precisely. But the opposite is true. If the many decide to oppress the one for the good of the collective, it's also self-defeating, because the many, they are composed of ones. So if the fascist, not the historical fascist, but it can be a historical Italian fascism, or German National Socialism, or Japanese imperial military fascism, or the modern version of techno-fascism that we find in Asia or in other countries, if the many, or if actually it's the few, they are very smart, these politicians, they speak in the name of the masses. We are here to defend the interests of the people. That's what every oppressive ruler has said, probably. But actually, the few, they manipulate the many and say, we need to take the freedom back from the ones, or the one, because the individual, he brings about disruption, etc. But then, if the many oppress the one, so in ordinary language, if the masses, if in the name of the masses or the people, the individual liberties of the one are taken from him, the people oppresses itself because the masses are made up of ones. So yeah, that's why to find a proper balance, the ideal in the Western tradition is precisely the Republican ideal, not the Republican of the modern Republican Party of the US. Although there's a vague connection, but no, the ideal is the Republic in the noble sense, namely where the one has to sacrifice some of his liberties and freedoms for the good of the many, and the many they do the same. So there is a balanced, collective, reciprocal freedom with a sense of sacrifice, nonetheless. That's the ideal throughout the European tradition. That here I will pick up my books. Hey, I said that the video would be short, but oh, it's just 45 minutes. Yeah, I will just conclude by the first two categories, and then I will work all night because whatever. Because I have to make my thoughts intelligible somehow. Yeah. Here I have a book by Mr. Where is the book? Yeah. Sorry. I talk while I move. I don't know if anyone will listen to it, but basically, I become smarter every day. Almost every hour, I become smarter because yeah. And the more I become smart, the more I keep repeating this. But yeah. I understand that I have failed to communicate because my truth, my worldview is way too ludicrous, way too disconnected from ordinary reality. Yeah. Mr. Quentin Skinner, one of the proponents and advocates of the Republican tradition, namely liberty before liberalism. Precisely, liberalism would be the degeneracy on a collective scale of too much individual rights. And there we will not talk about a measure and balance, but this is a determination of being. But basically, when the one is granted too much individual freedom, it brings oppression to the many. That's why liberalism degenerates into a mob rule and the madness of crowds. Yeah. And that's why there has to be re-establishment of some sort of balance and order, but the political trap to avoid is, of course, the counter-reaction, which is too excessive, namely fascism, which would be too much power to the masses over the ones, but because the masses are made of ones, they would self-oppress, which would be kind of stupid, but yeah. And yeah, so what I can say is that one and many, these determinations, we find them. Here it's a little bit more complex in the realm of the logic of essence, namely the whole and the parts. The whole is one and the parts are the many parts of the whole. So the whole and the parts are in the realm of essence what the one and the many are in the realm of being. And in the realm of the concept, I cannot introduce the system in every video because it would be too long, so I have I recommended people to watch videos, so yeah, I cannot make an introduction on the totality of the system in every video. I tried to do this yesterday and it took more than 5 hours. So yeah, I tried to make a short introduction. It lasted more than 5 hours, so I will not do this every day, but yeah. So yeah, the logic, I speak here to the people who are vaguely familiar with the logic. Universal, particular, the universal is one, and the particularization are the many aspects of the universal. So we find the same determinations, but they are more determined, more concrete, more rich, yeah. And now, attraction and repulsion. So of course we find this in the realm of physics, with the electromagnetic force and also the gravity. There's only the attractive aspect in gravity, and in electromagnetism there is attraction and repulsion. But in the realm of psychology and culture, people are attracted by what they find repulsive, namely horror movies, horror games, etc. They find this in Western countries. They find this attractive. Whenever there's a scandal, a political scandal, a moral scandal, a politician cheated on his wife, beat up his wife. We find this in America. Johnny Depp, whatever. President Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, etc. People are attracted by what they find repulsive. The anti-racist, they keep talking about the racist, so they are kind of attracted by what they find repulsive. The anti-Semites, they keep talking about the Jews, so they are attracted by what they find repulsive as well. In a more positive way, Jordan Peterson, he's kind of repulsive, not physically. You look good, Mr. Peterson. But Jordan Peterson, he's kind of repulsive morally because he defends right-wing values, a tradition, a conservatism. He's a little bit too radical. But women and leftists, they are attracted by Peterson. There is this kind of tension, like, he's so controversial. So that's the good unity of attraction and repulsion. And the same goes with Donald Trump. He's repulsive for modern standards. He was 6 years ago, no? He was very repulsive because he wanted to defend the interest of white people. the working class. Basically, and that's repulsive for the elite. How dare you defend the interest of ordinary workers? You know that the system is built to promote the interest of the underclass and the privileged white liberal elites. Well, they do not say this, but everyone knows this basically. So Donald Trump is very repulsive because he wants to defend the interest of not only the white working class, but the workers of the country. So that's repulsive in the view of white liberal leftists mostly who advocate economic globalism. That's why they are so attracted by Trump, and they keep talking about Trump all the time. Another example in American society, Eminem and Slim Shady, when he made his breakthrough on the cultural scene 25 years ago, or in the early 2000s, he was repulsive because he was controversial, but he attracted an enormous amount of attention. Another example, a little bit more sinister for Americans, Ted Bundy is very repulsive, but some women were attracted nonetheless. That's the logic. This explains a lot of psychological human phenomena. It explains a lot. So basically here we are at the beginning really of the logic, and already with just these very simple determinations we can deduce or understand and interpret politics, psychology, ethics partly. Yeah. Here I will end the video, and I will start the next one. I will talk about this in a more pleasing sense. Women, they are really the weird aspect, like women who cried for the death of Ted Bundy. Maybe that's a little bit feminine insanity partly, but in a more comical sense. Women, I think about Rihanna, rude boy. Sometimes they enjoy when men are a little bit rude in a good sense. Women, they love this. I know, because this is what they sing about in most of the songs. Yeah, that's what I could say about attraction, repulsion, the one and the many. Also in the history of philosophy, those who talked about the many as a determination of the absolute were the materialists of ancient Greece, the pre-Socratics, like Leucippus, Democritus, Epicurus, and Lucrece, and subsequently all the materialist and eventually Marxist philosophers who said that reality is made up of atoms, so everything is material, and this is the many. The many would be the atoms and the molecules, and the void between the atoms would be kind of the repulsive principle. So that's the materialist view. So we have really the highly speculative metaphysical view, which is Neoplatonism, and we have not at the same historical time because there are distinctions of century, but we have the other Greek views of the pre-Socratics, Epicurus, Lucrece, and subsequently in the Renaissance. In the Middle Ages, they didn't like the materialist very much, but in the Renaissance and the modern era with French materialist Gassendi, in the 18th century D'Holbach, Helvétius, partly Diderot and D'Alembert, they were not really materialists, but they were materialists in France. Hobbes in the 17th century he thought of reality as just material partly. And then with Marx in the 19th century, so there's a continuity, that will be the transition for the next video, a continuity of the materialist school of thought, which is simply to consider that reality is manifold in terms of material components, whatever. And that's what I could say. So I will make a pause so that the video is not too long. I will remake the short introduction. No, precisely because I still have, I have prepared my books. I will just talk a little bit again because in the realm of intelligence, so I talked about the psychology of behavior and now the psychology of intelligence. Arthur Jensen, the G factor, the science of mental ability, and the G factor is basically the substance of intelligence. So even the Anglo-Saxon, he was not Anglo-Saxon, but he had an Anglo-Saxon mindset, the scientists, even though they do not believe in metaphysics, they nonetheless use metaphysical categories, logical categories, and the G factor is really the essence of intelligence, or the concept of intelligence, the substance, that which remains when all the particular ways of expressing one's intelligence are left aside, and only the pure substantial, I don't know what word they use, but intelligence in its pure, not in its pure abstraction, but pure intelligence in the realm of neurobiology, not in the realm of metaphysics. This is what they call the G factor, and Helmut Nyborg made a tribute to Arthur Jensen, the scientific study of general intelligence. A solid measure of general intelligence. So that would be the universal, abstracted from all the particularities. And precisely here's the connection: one and many in the realm of the concept. This is universal and particular, and there are particular modes of intelligence, various kinds of intelligence, various types of intelligence that some rather left-wing psychologists call multiple intelligence, but intelligence is one and many, namely there is a G factor, a general substratum, a general substrata or substance, but which is also made manifest in many kinds of intelligence. There is the logical, mathematical intelligence, there is a visuospatial intelligence, verbal intelligence, working memory, as they call this. There is social intelligence, emotional intelligence, rhythmic, musical intelligence, whatever. So intelligence is one and many, and the debates in the field of psychology are precisely between those who use the category of unity, like Jensen and Nyborg, and those who use the category of multiplicity, like usually leftists. But the two, one might say, the many views on the concept of intelligence, concept in ordinary sense, can be applied, although unity is more serious in a way, because it is the one which brings about the many. There is one general factor of intelligence which is made manifest through many faculties, mental, cognitive faculties. And it can be used here, we can use universal, particular, which are determinations of the concept. Okay, I've talked for more than 30 minutes. Now I will keep making videos if people are interested. I talk about God, about metaphysics, religion. Also, yeah, I will a little bit less pleasant, but for me, the self-negation of the one. There are religions which talk about self-negating gods. Of course, there is Jesus, the self-negating God, but there's also Odin, and Jesus and Odin, they have in common that they are gods who self-negate. They kind of sacrifice themselves. That's the good view. And this is where it comes from. It's the self-negation of the one. Yeah. Look what you made me do. And here I will conclude with Taylor Swift. At the end of the video, look what you made me do. There are many Taylor Swifts, but actually they are all one, but they are many nonetheless. So if you want to listen to the song, that's a great work of art. Taylor Swift, she's a one of a kind with many talents. Yeah, I will conclude the video on this, and